Hi, Tisa. So, Tisa, you grew up in New York City at a very interesting and exciting time. Excuse me. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like for you as a young person with an interest in the performing arts to be in New York City at that time?
Yes, I grew up in New York after I came from China. My father was the Consul General, was assigned to be the Consul General in New York City, representing nationalist China. I was born after World War II, so it was a very tumultuous time and a very difficult departure. I had to take a boat, a ship, by myself with some family friends for a month from Shanghai. So growing up in New York in 1950s, as a diplomat's daughter, the expectations were so high to be really perfect, and because we were representatives of the foreign government, my mother always thought we were going to go back to China. And as you know, then the Communist Revolution was 1949, so we couldn't go back. And but my father was in New York for 11 years. And this is relevant because then my mother took me to so many Western musicals, operas, theater, really exposed me to the arts and to what New York City has to offer. And I think as a young child of 7 or 8 or 9, I think that was an incredible inculcation. I happen to, I think my bringing in New York, it was not without difficulty. I didn't speak the language at all. They put me in first grade. I didn't know a word of English, so that's how I sort of was just learning by immersion. So I think that wanting to explore a fantasy world and a world where I could create and be in control, which was the theatrical arena, is how I think I started. I think having the advantage of being given piano lessons when you're 6 or 7, and ballet lessons and Chinese dance lessons, all of that, I'm not sure I appreciated it that much at that time. But I think all of that is very, very important. So training, inculcation, exposure. And then when I went to Performing Arts High School as a piano major, those high school years were really the catalyst. To see Martha Graham dance, the last time she danced was in Clytemnestra, to see her in Clytemnestra in 1959, I think it was absolutely opened up my eyes and to what theater, and really influences what the kind of theater we do now at Pan Asian.
Do you have very specific memories of some of the people, the performers or performances you saw as a very young child?
Well, I was probably at the theater 3-4 nights a week. I was a very good student, so I didn't neglect homework. But we could get standing room for $5 in those days, but very often we were given free tickets to watch Leonard Bernstein conduct from the very first row. And at that time, it was Carnegie Hall. I saw only his legs, and I looked up, and he would just rise up and down, and he was so physically engaged as well. As I just thought, this is amazing. And of course, Carlo Manotti's opera, The Consul. I just think I was so fortunate. Performing arts really gave me the kind of platform. One of my colleagues at that time in performing arts was Al Pacino, but we never met then. We met later when I did Pablo Hummel, basic training of Pablo Hummel in Boston and on Broadway. But it's very curious about how things work out. It's almost as if it's destiny. And I was very fortunate. I went to Barnard. I had 2 years in the UN, and 67 and 68 as a UN guide, bilingual guide, giving tours in Mandarin as well as English. So these were all wonderful experiences. I think I joined Actors Equity because I was a dancer. So I was a dancer first, lots of revivals of Flower Drum Song, The World of Susie Wong, and the national tour of Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. So these were all legitimate, professional, what I would say, American theater recognized jobs. And I felt that's also was incredible training and exposure. The national tour of Funny Thing was about 11 months. That was a really, really interesting. I saw the entire United States. I think it's 48 states. Played in a lot of Schubert houses. So all of this, I think, was very important to help shape where I really ended up. And the curious thing is that I ended up in early 70s, just finished King and I think at Jones Beach, and also on Broadway with Lovely Ladies, Kind Gentlemen, which was the musical version of Tea House of the August Moon. I ended up at La Mama for Ellen Stewart. She cast me.
How did you end up there then?
I can't remember exactly, but I think we auditioned or had friends. But she was doing something called The Legend of the White Snake and cast me as the Green Snake. It's a very famous Chinese fable, many, many different interpretations of it. And there I worked with many people, that Sao Shimono for one, and La Mama was another really, really strong platform. That was catalytic. Ellen Stewart is my mother on earth. Oh, I should mention that my mother died in 1968, very young. It was very traumatic. It took me a year to get over her death. And so how I channeled my grief and my emotions was into an original work called The Return of the Phoenix. It was an adaptation of a famous Chinese Peking opera. Peking opera utilizes dozens and dozens of performers, and maybe 50 or more. I did it with 5 actors for Ellen. And this was dedicated to the memory of my mother. It was very, very relevant, but it was really kind of world-shaking because the Chinese community, the upper Mandarin class, they thought it was just anathema that I would dare to experiment and distort or reinterpret Peking opera. Well, we got such great reviews by the New York Times. CBS TV bought it for their kickoff of their Festival of Lively Arts. So I was very, very pleased, and because all the actors, of course, went to be on television. So that began my long-term relationship with Ellen, and she asked me to stay and head an ongoing troupe because I have so many wonderful actors.
And that was I think La Mama Chinatown or a Chinatown troupe, or?
Well, she had a La Mama Chinatown under the guidance of Qing Ye, but after the Return of the Phoenix, she asked me to stay on to just direct my own group. Because I had so many wonderful actors and we created works. I really wanted to experiment. I really wanted to try to showcase the wonderful, talented actors that I knew. And they include people like Raoul Aranas, who has gone on to Broadway in Miss Saigon as the engineer, and King and I, Ernest Abuba. Very, very vital to the evolution of Pan-Asian rap. And many, many other wonderful actors. But what was important is that we were doing work that I thought really dispelled stereotypes and the limitations for Asian American actors. We did a Midsummer Night's Dream in 2 languages, in Mandarin and English. It was also quite creative and earth-shaking. I think that we'd never even really thought of formally incorporating as a company, but the most important thing was the work. And the work then included us, Carl Goldoni, and another experiment with all Asian American actors, but each actor, the aside, through Faudino was Raul Aramas, his origins is Filipino. So his asides were done in Tagalog. And of course, the father was Henry Yuk, he did it in Cantonese. And so these are the kinds of experimentation that allowed us to do the world classics, and unlimited by race or ethnicity. And I think that we didn't even realize we are part of the off-Broadway movement, but there's no question that some of the catalytic events happening then, I mean, the civil rights movement, we're all, I think, we in theater of a certain age are all benefit from that swell. Vietnam War, anti-war movements, and I think that forming a company saying that Asian Americans too can play any role, unlimited, we too can reach the stars as Clytemnestra or Blanche Dubois. That was really important. That was then kind of our motto. So I guess I'm sort of political without saying, I don't think I am political, but I do feel that we were very much shaped and informed by so many things that were happening globally. When I was a guide at the UN, in the 60s, there was worldwide an independence movement by so many countries, particularly in Africa. So, and of course the Polynesian Islands. When I was a guide at the UN, I remember when the chieftain of Tonga had just this tiny little island in the Pacific, became an independent nation, and the chief, the king of Tonga, walked into the General Assembly with all his feathered headdress, his spear, and his native skirt, grass skirt. It was amazing, right in the General Assembly with all of. So it.
Did you have a feeling when you were at La Mama and had this Asian American troupe that this off-Broadway movement was actually maybe an independence movement or a revolutionary movement? Did you feel it at the time, in the late 60s?
I guess I was really not that aware that we were actually forming any kind of new revolution, but I was very keenly aware of the great artists that we were met at that time in the 70s at La Mama. So my troupe, Ellen called us the Chinese theater troupe of La Mama, as La Mama. Tisa Chang's Chinese theater group as La Mama. But we were invited to work in collaboration and workshop with Peter Brook's company when he was there, Andre Servan's company when he was there, Mavis Taylor from South Africa when she was there. So this was highly informative, and these are people. Actually, Peter Brook is quite an amazing man.
And how long did this troupe at La Mama thrive and exist before you would change it?
Probably 8 or 10 years. We left La Mama in 81. Pan Asian was formally incorporated in 1977. That was when I did 6 months on Broadway in the basic training of Pablo Hamo. In 72, we had done that production. Al had in Boston, the theater company of Boston. David Wheeler was the director. So years later, when Al wanted to do it on Broadway, he reassembled a lot of the people who went. So, it was with the earnings from that show that we really formally incorporated Pan Asian. It's curious. This is an anecdote. But we had just created the Legend of Wu Chang, something, and we had performed at La Mama and Buffalo, in Buffalo Studio Arena of Buffalo. And when we had the opening night of Legend of Wu Chang at La Mama was the same night that I was performing in Pablo Hamo. So I asked the director, and I put it in my contract, that I would miss the first act, so I could go and open Wu Chang at La Mama, and I'll come back for the second act. Well, Al was furious because he said he didn't know, he really wanted, he said, gee, I didn't know I had to run it by you, you know. I said it was in my contract, and I put it in there. I had anticipated, you know, needing that legal aspect. Anyway, so that's here nor there, except that he is very hands-on and he is very, very, proprietary about every aspect in that production.
Now, you went from high school performing arts, and you went tour guide, and came into theater as a dancer. You came into theater as a dancer primarily, right?
Yeah, no, actually also as an actress.
As an actress.
Yeah, I played I played Susie in The World of Susie Wong at Totem Playhouse for Bill Putch. The film, Ambush Bay, my first Hollywood film, where I was the lead. And it was about, I played a Japanese-American spy, and in World War II, helping Wyatt Earp, Hugh O'Brien and Jim Mitchum escape. And we filmed about a month and a half in the Paksahans Falls in the Philippines. Now imagine spending a month and a half with those guys in the jungles. I can only just, it was, it was lots of fun. It was very hot, very, very hot. We would, the Manila Hotel in Manila, we were housed there. But it was, so these are exciting, incredible opportunities for a young person and for a Chinese young actress. I cannot tell you this, my experience professionally as a young person, as a young artist, really shaped why I founded Pan Asian, why I've devoted my entire adult career to Pan Asian, because I had played prostitutes, bar girls, Vietnamese dead nurses. Oh, there was an off-Broadway show called Brothers. I did not have a word to say, but I got the best review because I was so charismatically glowing. But I was a dead body. I was a nurse that had no lines. And so I didn't think, I thought, I really believe we have more potential and should have more opportunity than this. So, but that was a very interesting time, see, the 60s and the 70s. And you know, if I hadn't had those first-hand experiences, then I would never never know that we want more. In King and I remember one of the summer stock, in those days we had summers, and I was one of the wives, a dancer in the ballet, glorious ballet, of course, you all know. But Tup Tin has to scream, and she did, as a singer, she did not want to scream, so the director asked, who would like to do a scream? I raised my hand. After studying with Uta Hagen, I can do a scream. So I did. So I screamed every night. That was my acting experience in that show.
And you made in that period of time when off Broadway was beginning to really sort of take hold, you were moving between mainstream Broadway, and then you had your La Mama, you did some, and then you were doing off Broadway as well. Was there a difference in the social environments there for you, or did you feel welcome wherever you went, or how was that?
Pretty much so. I was very, very shy. You know, growing up in New York, being so different, not understanding the language, I became very introverted. I think I was very introverted. I think I'm still shy. I was very introverted, so I didn't talk very much. And I didn't express myself so freely. Certainly with age and experience and maturity, I think I've overcome some of that. But that intense shyness really did keep me a little bit, there's a little bit of a barrier, I felt always. I could never feel as comfortable with the other actors. But I grew out of it, I guess.
And at a certain point at La Mama, you seem to have conceptualized a project. And was that your first directing opportunity as well?
Yes, La Mama Ellen really gave me a free rein to create. And as a director, I just loved it. I loved creating, I loved producing, I loved every aspect of organizing from the beginning to the end. And Mr. Jim, their financial person, always said, Tisa, you're the only one that brings it under budget at La Mama. So, the sheet really gave, I mean, to have a space. Our office was at La Mama for many, many years. Ellen donated the office at Ray Jones Street. So she really helped us create Pan Asian. And so in '77, we incorporated, we still stayed at La Mama for years in her office until 2001.
So you're from La Mama, where you're under the umbrella of an existing established company. You create Pan Asian Rep. So what were those early years like for you in terms of building a company and building a reputation and building a body of work?
Oh boy, by the skin of our teeth. It was so difficult. I mean, not only financially, because everybody shared at that time, before we went on contracts with equity. You know, we just shared the box office. And if it was $50 each person, it was always fair, it was always equitable. I think what producing down there allowed us is a real sense of independence and control of our destiny. That's what was so important to me. Working in commercial arena, I had no control. And basically we were told what to do. And but at La Mama, you know, we had to take responsibility for everything, for every dollar, for every hour of time, for finding the actors. And so all of that operational kind of responsibility was very also very, very important in shaping how Pan Asian is quite organized. We're well run and we're very, very financially responsible. I guess being Chinese really helps, but I love numbers.
Was there a point in the development of Pan Asian where you thought, okay, was there a particular success, or was there a particular production, or was there a particular milestone where you felt you were actually kind of safe, where this was actually going to work?
Well, firstly, it's the mission of Pan Asian. I think what set us apart was I never called the company Asian American this or that. I purposely chose Pan Asian, all inclusive of Asia. For me, to try to introduce the great masterworks from China, Japan, India, Korea was very, very important. And we actually started that at La Mama in the late 70s. Introducing Cao Yu's work, China's master living playwright, who that was one great achievement, because we would perform his plays in English. So either we found a translation or we ourselves adapted it. So that was great. But our mission has always been, and you know, I've never acted with Pan Asian. I've never used Pan Asian for my own self growth, except as a director and producer. So I really, the Pan Asian is founded and still has very strong core values. You know, Confucian values are very, very important. That I'm so grateful for being Chinese and growing up in my household, because that sense of responsibility, loyalty, honor. You have to do the work first, is very, very those are core values. So at Pan Asian, we always did, we love to experiment artistically, but we were very, very responsible as an organization to our artists and staff.
And have you seen, how do you find the work? How do you find the materials that become Pan Asian productions?
Yeah, it started with the experimental bilingual, the multilingual experimentation of classic Western works started at La Mama. Then we continued to introduce China's great writers and Japan's great writers in translation into English. And I traveled to Korea and to India to find contemporary playwrights that we could produce. I would say that Yellow Fever, Rick Shiomi's little spy noirish mystery, put us on the map because it was so successful, and that was what, 1980, 81. And so we did so much touring with that nationally, and also ran it off-Broadway for 6 months, and had different leads, Sam Shikazi. Remember Mako came out
Yes.
to do it. So that was something that really put us, I have to say we've been so fortunate in getting such regular reviews and really rave reviews and the kind of attention paid by the New York Times. That really, it was so crucial to our evolution. But the kind of work, we will continue to do some works in 2 languages. We're utilizing aspects of my heritage. China, well, China has such a palette of literary classics to draw from, but also the Asian American playwrights then starting out. So it's not only Rick Shiomi, but there's Philip Gatanda, and of course a very young David Henry Wong. So, but also Momoko Iko and Wakako Yamauchi. I mean, all the great Asian American writers that were all from the 60s movement. And that was very satisfying, that we're able to introduce these new voices and give them a very important place. New York, producing professionally off-Broadway in New York City is a big cachet. And yes, we started working with Actors Equity and paying pension and health on top of a salary. I mean, it's a small salary, but in the 80s. So we've always wanted to work with the unions. I joined SDC in 1976, I think, because of Wu Chang going to the Studio Arena. But then I sort of withdrew because I didn't really want to impact Pan Asian while we were so fledgling. And then I rejoined, of course, in the 90s, and I served on this board for 12 years. So it's we like working with the professional leadership of the American theater arena.
And as an established off-Broadway company, you've seen, as you've mentioned, a lot of writers and artists come in early in their careers. And how do you deal with them as time goes by and maybe they become a little looking over the fence at the greener pastures and stuff?
Yes, we have some very.
You've been around long enough that you've seen this more than once, I think.
I think somebody at the NEA panelist said, well, Pan Asian's history is a who's who of Asian American actors. Yes, Lucy Nuke had her debut in 1993 or 4 in Fairy Bones. She's now certainly a star. Daniel Day Kim in Adult's House, also in the early 90s. But most of the actors, they went to Hollywood and became celebrities. But most of the actors, I actually still have actors that have been with us for 30, 35 years. We have a senior artist corps. Veteran status is very important to me. Loyalty is one thing, but talent. Because people actors don't grow old, they get better, they get wiser, they get more mature, they expand. We expand, our talent, our energies, our what we want to accomplish. Because if we ever stop, then it's time, to go to pasture. But I don't think artists ever stop. I think this is a lifelong pursuit. This is not just a job. Pan Asian is a philosophy. It is my personal philosophy, and it is a lifelong pursuit. I think being an artist is simply a lifelong pursuit. So, but the senior artist includes Ernest Abuba, Ron Nakahara, Henry Yuk, Raul Aramis, and Mia Katigbak, who founded her company later on, was early on with us. So we have a really, and now we love the fact that we have shows that can utilize the veteran artists working in tandem and in mentoring and collaborating with the next generation. So we have a very, very active training program and also workshops. We really, really love inviting this kind of collaboration. And while we cannot be all things to all people, and I think I'd be foolish to try to, I do feel we have a very strong and comprehensive program of service, education, school matinees, my collaborators. Some of the other companies, for instance, Woody King is a very dear friend and colleague. His New Federal Theater, his theater. I feel that Intar was also another partner, meaning we would collaborate sometimes on marketing strategies, but as colleagues, this kind of collegiateship is really, really helpful, has been so helpful to me. It really has not been easy. The evolution of Pan Asian, some of the fiscal, the one year that I sat there, was in the 80s, it was Christmas, and I said, we have no money to pay the actors. So I sold a diamond ring, and my family's heirloom. It was a very hard lesson that I learned, never to get yourself into such a tight hole. But that was very early on in our evolution. So now I'm trying to make sure the funding and the grants are in place, and government has been wonderful. The government, certain major foundations and funders have just been wonderful, and also all of our board and the individual funders, individual donors. I think it's quite an advantage to now be such a venerable, to have such a track record, because I don't have to work so hard to prove anything. If anything, I'm always exploring now what's the next challenge? What can we do bigger and better? Not necessarily bigger, but deeper. And certainly reaching out to my colleagues more. I feel that Pan Asian in the past has been a little bit isolated. Because we're so unique and so singular, the mission and the repertoire is so singular, I guess I felt a little bit, again, separate from, let's say, the regional theater movement. But now I feel in the commercial arena. But now the lines are really, really, the lines of, the wall came down in Germany, right? So I feel the lines of demarcation of how we define ourselves is also blurring and interesting. So that's very exciting. These kinds of partnerships that we could do. I never stayed in Hollywood after that movie because I didn't like the culture there, and I was not that comfortable. I love the living theater. I love New York. So also I don't drive, so I would have had to have a handsome young chauffeur.
Yeah. So it's over 37, 38 years. It's always been a struggle. So how is the struggle to maintain an off-Broadway company different now than it was in those formative years in the late 70s?
Well, fortunately, we are very recognized. So that is really helps, and I don't really have to bang on doors saying, oh, let me tell you about what we do and how wonderful we are and how important. But we do need to keep testing ourselves and keeping ourselves. I try so hard to listen, to be alert to what younger people are saying and want, and how we can continue to contribute to not only the not-for-profit arena, where we have a very nice niche or voice, but on a larger scale. So now we want to have global partnerships. I mean, going back, China is now, for me not to take advantage of the kind of work that we do and have the Pacific bridges that we can build with China, Japan, and Vietnam. I mean, that's so exciting.
Is there an off-Broadway audience that's different and distinct from a Broadway audience, or do you have to address certain issues with a targeted audience, or do you just find the audience that's there for what you're doing?
Yeah, our audiences, we have a very, when we started, probably more Asian than Americans or general audience. But now I would say it's about half and half. And now we're performing, we made a big decision last year to work on the theater row exclusively. We have been in various church spaces, and so that's going to be very helpful, I think, in attracting a certain more mainstream audience. But Pan Asian works very hard to really reach the immigrant communities and the communities that our plays are about. It's not just China and Japan, but the South Asian population and Tibetans with Quats, the Tibetan project that we did. So this constantly wanting to reach out and touch people and make it relevant for these communities. That is all part of our mission. I guess I'll just have to live to be 100 or 150.
Okay. Where do you see now? You've seen such a development. You've pretty much seen almost all the history of off-Broadway, from inside, from as a performer through a producer now. So what do you see as the future now? Where do you see this movement going? Is it still vital? What does it have to do to stay important?
It's a wonderful question. I really want to think about it for just a second.
Okay. So, in your career, both as a performer and now as the head of this prestigious theater company with such a long, venerated history, you've seen off-Broadway pretty much through most of the arc of its history. What do you see for the future in terms of opportunities and challenges for the off-Broadway movement?
I think more and more there are partnerships, collaborations with each other. I think that will strengthen, allow a longer run, share resources and share, because we now have to fight so hard for space in the papers to be reviewed. Everybody coming out of college now wants to start their own company or do a one-man show. So I feel that collaboration and partnerships is a real way to go. I think that expanding into aspects of a commercial arena is not a bad idea. For instance, we're very, very limited in how long we can run because of the space rental situation. So if we had our own space, or if we could just lock into a longer run, that's certainly a way. Diane Paulus was really smart years ago. She did the donkey show. It would only run on weekends in these alternative spaces, but it ran forever. And that's how Diane got her name out there as a director. And of course now she's winning awards on Broadway. So I think this kind of partnership and thinking bigger and saying not to be limited by how we started, what our mission is, but to use it in a more expansive way. It's curious because I think CUNY TV is going to do a video project about Asians on Broadway, and they'll be interviewing me next month. But that's a really big issue now. That there's just not enough Asian American represented in the mainstream. I do want to give some credit and thanks to some of the other actors who started out with me. I really have to mention Frida Foshen in the first Shoda Macbeth, and Natsuko Ohama, and June Angela, who was the lead in Cambodia Agonistes. They are all in LA, but we stay in touch, and June is actually on our advisory board, June Angela. And recently we just did a reading presentation of Sayonara, which he started originally in the paper mill, and I feel it has really that musical is now time for a new look, which Pan Asian is doing. So I feel very, it's again a full circle coming round. That is very harmonious. The circle is the perfect shape, and all Eastern religions believe in the moon gate. So I feel it now that we're in our 4th decade as a company. Wow, many things are coming back to complete a circle.
So can we now then look back a little bit and go back to those sort of La Mama, those formative years of La Mama and as Pan Asian was forming. Can you talk a little bit about some of the people you collaborated with on the creative side in those days?
Well, certainly Peter Brook was the leading light at that time. And he's a very, he's so brilliant and his work is so well known. And in those years, it was everybody just revered him. But he's really a very self-effacing, very low-keyed person. I think our companies being able to work together at that time, I think he was doing Mahabharata or something before that. But Andre Serban, certainly the young Andre Serban, was very, very influential. Not with Pan Asian so much, except that we would share spaces, we would share, we'd be able to stop in and watch his rehearsal process. Andre always got the large space downstairs on the first floor of Great Jones. We got the 4th floor. But he had these mass, really epic Greek projects, so he needed that space. So that was a little bit tit for tat. But a very influential person in my early years, when I was on tour with a funny thing happened on the way to Forum, is that I met James Lipton. And Jim really became my mentor, was very influential in my life personally, and less so professionally, because I resisted that kind of, I always thought, we don't cozy up to people for entree. And then I was also so overwhelmed by going out every night and meeting all the titans on Broadway at that time. I later worked with Hal Prince on Pacific Overtures, but Cy Coleman, Sheldon Harnick, we would go to East Hampton. We went together for 5 years. So East Hampton every summer. And it was just overwhelming. It was just almost too much, which is one of the reasons that we had to go our separate ways, because he's so larger than life. But I think for the sheer intelligence, for his knowledge of people in the business, and always it's that keen intelligence. I have to say that I think talent and intelligence are the things that are most attractive and the most lasting that I remember about people. And so, he opened, he introduced me to a lot of people, and it allowed me really to understand how Broadway and the arena, the commercial arena, worked. It was very, very exhilarating. So, too much so. But for a young person, I think that is exactly right, that we get a lot of experiences. But also the actors that I have worked with, Ernest Abuba, I keep mentioning him because one, he's an extraordinary actor. And in the 70s, he was so handsome. He had hair down to his shoulders. He was Lysander in Midsummer Night's Dream. He was the lead in The Legend of Wu Chang. He played all these leads. When I directed at Equity Library Theater, Pursuit of Happiness, let's say, no, he wasn't in that one, but when we did the Feydeau plays, the Feydeau farce, he was just such an inventive, as Boniface, such an inventive actor and artist. And now, of course, he is very, very aligned with Pan Asian, one of the founding. But we got married in 1976 when he was in Pacific Overtures for How Prince. And there I met many of our wonderful actors. Many of our actors were in it. And because we had gotten married, Pacific Overtures did not run more than 6 months on Broadway, unfortunately. It was really ahead of its time. It was really brilliant. But the national tour, though, because we had just gotten married, Hal put me in the show. And, I'm not a singer, but the wife, the Japanese wife, did not have to. That was Frida Fauchen's part, and she couldn't do it. So I sang. They asked me to sing for Hal and Steve, and so I had prepared a song, but I'm not really a singer. I'm a dancer and an actress. So they said, "Just sing Happy Birthday," and so I got cast anyway.
You were talking about you're kidding, but you were talking a little bit about the competition for space, physical space within La Mama. Can you talk about some of the venues and some of the spaces in those early off-Broadway days that
I feel I know every church space in New Manhattan. But
how
yes.
far off-Broadway is off-Broadway?
Oh gosh. Okay, so right after La Mama, we went to 28th Street in the Flower District. Then we were 15 years at St. Clement's. And I really wanted to buy St. Clement's. I said, they had a little garden in the back. I said, if we could just really take over this space, I would create a Chinese garden in the back. But no, that didn't happen. But we also, we performed for 6 months off-Broadway with Yellow Fever, and we worked at Puerto Rican Traveling Company. Miriam Colon bought, she's another colleague. She bought that firehouse on 47th Street. So we were there for 6 months. And then, we were also at the church space on West 86th Street recently, the last 10 years. I like staying at a place for at least 5, 10, 15 years. I do regret that we never found a space that we could take over, but then I wouldn't be a good landlord. Capital campaign is just, I'd rather really put my energies into the art and art making. And to talk about the satisfaction, I really care about actors who have devoted their lives to the living stage. I love the fact that they have multi-talents. Ernest is also a playwright and a director, but Ron has also become, Ron Akahara is a wonderful director, and Kaipo Schwab was he was Shogun Macbeth in the revival that we did in '08 of Shogun. He's a wonderful director. So, and many of the women, Kati Kuroda, wonderful director, actor, director, and some are writers. So it is very satisfying to see all of us, and instructors, we're growing and we're expanding and enriching ourselves as well as, I hope, the community. So.
Okay, do we have anything else you want to cover?
We didn't talk about all the other guys in my life. So.
We'll leave some for the sequel.
I think that's
Is
great.
that
That's
have we covered
perfect.
everything?
Yes.
Covered everything?
Yeah. Was there any crossover with Joe Papp?
Oh, we didn't talk about the protests.
Yes.
Why don't we do that? So, okay, so we've talked about movements, and we've talked about the 60s and stuff, so,
Yeah,
and Asian American identity in the theater, and you had talked a little bit about the issues with casting and stuff, so were there some...
Actually, I
milestones?
left out some of the key people in that movement in the 60s and 70s, and Alvin Lum, who has passed away, but at that time very active in Actors' Equity, had a group that we were all part of called the Oriental Actors of America. It was kind of a quasi-union, but he was really trying to formalize and empower Asian Americans in the 60s. And through that, we were very, very sensitive to some of the larger organizations, institutions, not using Asian American actors. When there was an Asian American play, Narrow Road to the North, Edward Bond's play at Lincoln Center, had very eminent American actors, but no Asian American actors. So we did a picket out there. Not me, I mean, I was on the picket line. I didn't organize it. But Joe Papp definitely was a real patron, I think, because he certainly did the early works of Fab, many early works. I was a dancer for Joe and Bernie Gersten in the 60s in Lollapalooza. It was a summer touring mobile show, and I was a dancer, and that's when I met Joe Papp. And he certainly later on, of course, did. The public theater it's 5 theaters. They're so lucky. They're so fortunate or smart, so they were certainly collaborators or influential, I think, in the Asian American art movement. But Basement Workshop, and then Jack Chan at Chinatown History Project. These are all, very influential people that I have to take my hat off to. Remember Fei Chang, Basement Workshop? So yes, we did the artistic movement. They did more the social activism movement, but all together, I think we form a very strong legacy. And CATA, Coalition of Asian American Theaters, 11 of us nationwide got together 5-6 years ago. So it's called Coalition of Asian American Theaters and Artists. CATA for short. We'll have the 4th Coalition Confest conference in Philadelphia in October. And this is a way of all of us, that's East-West Players, New Performing Arts, NATCO, NYU, New York, and others getting together, and Pan Asian, of course. Pan Asian as the second oldest theater, Asian American theater company in the nation, certainly the oldest east of the Rockies. I think that the kind of work that we've been doing, certainly under Mako's founding of East-West Players and all of those Asian American playwrights that he produced. I think we can't say enough about how important those years were and are. So I think we still have a lot of work to do because Broadway is not as inclusive as it might be. As a former dancer, I said there are so many musicals that you could cast, Asian American dancers or singers if the role is not right. If we don't fit into Edwardian England, but I do think. But then I always feel Pan-Asian. Let's do the work. Let's do the work that can go to Broadway, like Sayonara. And I think, or something new that we have a whole crop of wonderful new writers and actors, and so I feel very fortified. I guess I will have to live to be 150 years old.
Look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.